Hey guys, Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time on Doctor Who Classic, we watched the first 3 parts of Fury from the Deep. What was that one about?
Well, for lack of a better phrase, it's about a sentient seaweed.
Yep.
Some kind of thing in the North Sea that's clogging up the dispersal of oil and gas. And we've got the dynamic of, the Doctor and Jamie and Victoria have come in, and of course they're being assumed to have something to do with this. And you've got the scientists who are saying, hey, we need to stop this. There's obviously something organic clogging it up. And then you've got the guy who's running the facility who is, obviously a blue-collar type worker who says, no, I was out on the rigs for years and years, and this is the way it needs to be done, and we can't shut it down. And so it's basically right at the very end of the episode 3, we found out that some of the people are literally under the mental control of the, psychotic plant.
Yeah.
I guess you could call it. And one of them literally walked out into the water and disappeared. We are assuming did not drown, but, can somehow sustain themselves underwater. So.
Yeah. Basically. Also, the sonic screwdriver.
First time the sonic screwdriver, yes.
Yes, which we are speculating will be used to defeat the seaweed, because they always seem to be scared away, like every time Victoria screams.
Yes.
So,
well, yeah, we figured it has something to do with sound.
Yeah. So, and these things, they do all... It's probably not good to activate those right next to the microphone, but they all do make this very specific sound.
I don't even know how these work anymore.
That one is purely by touch.
Okay.
That one has a sensor that you don't even have to press a button. Although that does extend it, if you wanted to.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I've never played with these before.
Well, I'm sure that's great on the microphone, right in everybody's ear. And this one just has a simple switch. Oh, there you go.
Cool.
And they all have secret sounds and stuff. And this one used to make sounds. It doesn't do that anymore. Kind of broke after a week. And then obviously the shades don't either. Anyway. So yes. Our first introduction to the sonic screwdriver, which spawned all this merchandise that you can pay for. So.
And I actually think you've paid for most of those. I don't know that we bought you any.
I think for the most part, I've bought all of these.
Yeah, because I remember I bought you the cup and the TARDIS.
Yeah. So.
And the poster.
Yeah. So I think I've paid for most of these sonic screwdrivers. Like I'm also paying for the Doctor Who Blu-rays I'm getting now. So.
Thank you, Patreon.
Yes. Yes. Go support over at Patreon if you want to see more of these. Hey, eventually the third Doctor is going to get his own sonic screwdriver, so we're going to have to pick that up. So if you want to be sure that I get a sonic screwdriver, go on over to my Patreon page.
Shameless plug.
Exactly. And with that said, let's get right into the last 3 episodes of Fury from the Deep. Here we go.
Mr. Harris is in charge. When he comes back, he might possibly authorize the company helicopter to at least take a look.
We can do nothing.
Nothing.
Wait.
I did read that they were drilling for oil in the North Sea in the 50s. So I hadn't heard of it, but, that could have just been me. So if this is supposedly the late 60s or 70s, then, yeah, it would have been in full swing.
Well,
even you don't know really how bad it is, do you?
Well, no, not exactly.
Every time we go anywhere, something awful happens. With Daleks, Cybermen.
Yeti?
Yes, and Yeti. Why can't we go anywhere pleasant? Where there's no fighting. Just peace and happiness.
because then there wouldn't be a plot.
Again, this probably was fascinating in real time, seeing the moving plants.
Well,
Get him up! He said he was taking over from Robson. I wouldn't call that vague.
You've never met Robson, have you, Perkins?
No, but
When you do, you'll realize he's not the sort of man one pushes around.
Then what's all this about?
Just an internal squabble, I'd say. Harris is a bright man. I sent him down here thinking he might gain from Robson's practical experience. Obviously, the two haven't hit it off together.
So we're pouring oil. Politics?
Let's go and see, shall we?
Pouring oil on troubled waters calms the waters down.
Hurry! I'm mean, is it safe?
Oh, yes, miss, don't you worry about a thing. We'll take care of everything, won't we, Mr. Crow?
I mean, they're even standing there, evil. Like,
Seaweed creatures.
We won't allow...
We? Who, Robson? Who?
My...
My seaweed overlords.
nah,
Jim.
who I, for one, welcome.
Are you all right, Robson? And Mr. Robson?
I'm afraid that Mr. Robson is being controlled by some force that emanates from this weed.
Credit.
Controlled by weed. I've known some people like that.
Each time
It's
he's
still the
been proved
60s.
right. I think it's about time we started to believe him.
All right. The least I can do is listen.
Victoria!
That's what the Brigadier would do.
But seaweed's a vegetable matter, everyone knows that.
This is a
So are certain
struggle for power,
politicians.
Miss Jones.
No.
Matter over mind.
Well, that's pretty definite proof.
Victoria! The weed is trying to take over all the rigs and form one vast colony.
With what objective?
The saturation of the British Islands and perhaps in time the entire planet. Such a thing possible? Oh, yes. Unless we can find
Little
the
shop
nerve
with horrors.
center and destroy
No.
it. The first part of the invasion.
Doctor, don't go near!
It's begun. The Battle of the Giants.
I mean, might be a little melodramatic there, Doc.
It's a good way to end this episode, though.
Well,
Battle of the Giants. Wanting us to come back next week.
oh boy. There was a lot in that episode, honestly.
Well, we finally have the boss, Megan Jones.
Yeah.
Although, why did they keep calling her Megan Jones? Why not just Miss Jones or Minister Jones or whatever she was?
I don't know.
I thought that was kind of odd.
Yeah, it is interesting how Victoria says, why don't we get any, peace and quiet sometimes? Which, I mean, even... Because sometimes, there is stuff where it's like, okay, there's a lot of in-between stories that are also part of the canon. If you go to the Doctor Who wiki, there's a million of those things. So I'm sure, 8,000 other stories have happened with Victoria by this point. But I was even thinking, back in, I guess it was season 2, after they first got Vicky, and then it was like, oh, they're in Rome, and, the cliffhanger was that the TARDIS literally fell off a cliff. And then it just cut, and it's like, oh, we've been living in Rome for a month.
Yeah.
That's probably what Victoria needs, is a month just living somewhere nice,
Yeah.
They haven't really done that since. And it was kind of strange even then. It's like, really, the Doctor stayed in this one place for a month? But it's the first Doctor, and obviously it was still ancient Rome, so he probably enjoyed it. But that's honestly probably what Victoria needs. It's just sort of a month off.
I seem to recall in episode 3, she kind of hung back at one point in the corridor and said something about, why are we always facing a crisis like this? And now it's becoming more and more pronounced.
Yeah. Though I don't really know when Victoria leaves the show, so I'm wondering if maybe that's building up for a character arc, or if that is building up to her leaving the show.
I was going to say, that certainly seems to be where it's going, because she keeps saying, I like you and the Doctor, but this is getting too much for me.
Yeah, so, which, I mean, it's been a while since we've had, because we picked her up at the end of season 4, so it's been quite a while since we picked her up. This may be one of the, longest runs in a while for companions, especially for Jamie, who's been here even longer, since pretty much the beginning of season 4.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's entirely possible, although the thing is, you really got to find the right place to drop off Victoria.
Yeah.
This is not that place. Unless, this is the 60s, it would be hilarious, if this was the 60s and they go and they meet Ben and Polly and just be like, here, you can stay with them. They'll take you in, Because it's like, okay, she's from Victorian times, but her father is dead. She didn't have anyone else from that, so she would have to have a whole new setting, but this seaweed place is not the place to do that. So I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, send her to. Well, she's probably too old for Coal Hill School. Send her to Ian and Barbara.
Yeah. Or even wherever Dodo ended up. I don't even remember. Yeah. Just kind of
she went off to her aunt's house, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, somewhere off screen where we didn't get a proper goodbye. So
home for wayward companions.
Yeah. Which, I mean, now that I think about it, we are sort of stacking up companions in the present day. Because Ian and Barbara did get back. Ben and Polly were dropped off basically the same day.
Yeah.
Because Ben was able to catch his boat. And then because that was the same day, that's also where Dodo was left behind. So, yeah, you could honestly just drop off Victoria and they have like a nice little like a social group of former companions. So...
I jokingly said Little Shop of Horrors, but this is very similar to the whole Godzilla and them, the giant ants, and all the other nuclear things. So, wonder if that's part of what's causing this.
Maybe.
Because to him, pure oxygen would be toxic.
Exactly, Mr. Harris.
Well, then we can use the oxygen as a weapon against the weed.
Well, it's only a theory at the moment.
Well, as Mr. Harris said before, you've been right so far. There's no reason why you shouldn't be now.
Using the oxygen as a weapon. They just did this on a 13th Doctor episode. Except that was not a good episode, so this is much better.
Yeah, and it has to be pure oxygen, because the air that we breathe is really only has a very small amount of oxygen in it. It also has nitrogen and other gases.
But why don't you get the minister to call up the national defences?
What exactly do you suppose the armed forces could do?
Well, attack this weed or whatever it is.
How? If we attack the rigs, what about the men out there?
But we don't know they are there.
Equally, we don't know that they aren't. They could be prisoners, anything. And anyway, even if we blow the rigs out of the sea, there's no guarantee we'll end this nightmare.
Schrodinger's
might
workers?
well spread the menace as the doctor suggested.
This way, please, Miss Jones.
Right. And come along, Perkins. Don't look so worried, man. You might as well go home. I'm sorry. Come on.
It'd be hilarious if they called up the army and then Colonel Lethbridge Stewart showed up.
Miss Jones, I'd rather...
And then he just took control.
No.
Well, they got their money's worth on the guard.
It's incredible.
Why can't we do something?
We'll have to trust this strange doctor. He's the only one who seems to be able to anticipate events.
Don't you think that in itself is suspect?
He's our only hope.
It's pretty sus.
Two guys in the background there don't notice a guy with seaweed and goo all over him carrying an unconscious girl, stealing a helicopter?
I guess not.
Yeah, what's going on there? Well, you gotta admit the budgets are getting bigger.
Nah.
That's the nerve center!
It also doubles as a nice soft landing pad.
Blow the foam off with the back off of the helicopter.
I guess that's true. Or you could use a ladder.
Again, interesting to know if they actually filmed on one of these rigs.
Come in, Doctor. We've been waiting for you.
Well, that was super creepy.
Do you ever think, like, alright, you get to be the guy that kind of goes against the doctor in the episode. Like, oh, okay, it's kind of interesting. It's like, oh, there's always that one guy, he kind of, he's got conflict with the doctor. But this time, you're specifically like, you're going to have to be a little angry. Like, okay, that's great. What else am I doing? Alright, hear me out. Seaweed.
By episode 5, you're going to be a walking seaweed.
We're going to paint you green. We're going to put different goo around you. We're going to have seaweed tentacle arms coming out of your back. And you're going to be surrounded by foam and 4 other people who look like this. Just write my name on the check correctly. It's always just such a weird thing. Which, I mean, I guess people have to know what they're getting into with Doctor Who.
If you're going on Doctor Who, you're probably going to play some unusual parts.
Well, I also thought, like, you know, when Troughton took over, you know, if he watched anything from, you know, Hartnell, it's like, okay, it's a pretty, maybe not a simple part, but, you know, it's a nice part. It's all right and good. You get to here, it's like, all right, so you're going to be in a helicopter, and you're going to climb down a rope ladder to this place that is covered in foam, and we're going to have to film all of this on location. We're going to do all of this. I don't know if this is exactly the part he thought he was signing up for. Like, the last guy didn't have to do all this.
You'll notice, though, that the climbing down the ladder was from a distance, so that's probably a stuntman. But even so, it seems to me that a lot of this must have been filmed on an actual rig.
Yeah.
And again, the North Sea is not known for being calm, you know, even in the summertime. Yeah. So I would imagine this was very cold and kind of frightening if they were. Now, the outdoor scenes. Now, the indoor scenes, I'm sure, are still, you know, back on the sets. But yeah, this is way beyond anything I think they've ever done before.
Yeah. Now, I guess, in fairness for the climbing down, because you're right, they didn't actually climb out of the helicopter. They, you know, did some camera work on that, which they also did that a couple times with Hartnell. Like, wasn't it in... I don't remember what that Dalek episode... Oh, it was The Chase at the end, where they had to, like, climb down the Dalek or Mechanoid City or whatever that was. And obviously they didn't show them climbing down, but they climbed down that, and then... Wasn't it, like, in Planet of Giants, where it's like, oh, we have to climb up this, like, 6-foot drain pipe, but we're, like, you know, this tall. And it's like, yeah, I'd love to see the first Doctor try doing that. So even though, obviously, yes, a lot of that was, you know, camera trickery, it's like, is this exactly the role that Troughton thought he was getting, you know?
And so far, now, they did reiterate that Jamie was able to escape from Mr. Quill because Victoria screamed, so...
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing the Doctor even thinking about the sonic screwdriver at this point.
Yeah. I mean, he did say, like, I don't think it was your punch that knocked him down. Yeah. So I think it's in the back of his mind.
I cannot escape. You must join us. You must join us. You will join us. Scream again, Victoria.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it's all right now. The helicopter's waiting. Come along. Mind the stairs, they're slippery.
Well, they figured it out. Let's move on.
Is Robson's helicopter in there? But it hasn't got a driver. I've been dying to get my hands on one of those things. Come on.
Oh, no.
Go on.
Yikes.
Ugh.
Anyway, ask Victoria. What's talked about one of these things?
No.
Don't worry, Victoria. Very primitive machine, you know. It's too easy to control.
Primitive machine. In fairness, this one will actually respond to your commands.
Very impressive special effects.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, couldn't if you go blades first, just slice through them.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think the Doctor could do that. Takes a lot of skill to make a helicopter do a 360 like that.
Well, that's strange. What? But I was always under the impression that you couldn't loop the loop in a helicopter.
He did that by accident, apparently. Man, it's like when we get a recon episode that has a big fight in it. Like, man, it has to be this episode.
Yes, thank you so much. Just something.
How do we land?
It up all right.
Nuh.
And it should be, however, how do I land it?
Nuh.
But yes, you screamed.
I screamed.
It's her scream, her particular pattern of sound that does the trick. So that's why the crew...
See, Victoria, it's good to have existential terror.
Possibly not. Have you got a tape recorder or some such thing? Yes. Victoria, I want you to scream. He will record it. Make a loop of it so that we can repeat it endlessly. Right up.
So they're not going to use the sonic screwdriver for it.
Doesn't look like it.
I thought he was going to, like, send the screwdriver through the pipes. Make it out of your chair. Oh, they actually have lasers.
Send out the company helicopters right away to the control ring. I want a full report right away.
Very good, sir.
Oh, that was just it.
I don't know what to say except thank you.
I thought that was just the weeds that were here. I guess we just did it all.
You'll be back with us in less than an hour. You'll be back.
We're all going out for drinks. Oh wow, we really did. Never mind.
I think I wanted to keep you locked up, Doctor.
Well, lots of people have tried.
Well, that was a nice.
Man, we never get this part of the mission. We always just bail
Oh dear.
at the first chance.
Mrs. Harris, I wonder if you'd mind if Victoria stayed with you for a little while. You see, she's got no parents or home, and
Well, of
it is a bit difficult.
We'd be delighted to have you for as long as you want to stay. Oh, would you?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Jamie and I will stay for another day, just in case you want to think again.
Look, we'll talk it over later.
Now, Jamie.
Where do you lot think you're going? Another 3 minutes before your relief arrives.
Nice to know you're back to normal, sir.
If I didn't know you better, Chief, I would swear you were giving me lip.
Oh, I wouldn't.
Jamie,
Yes?
you wouldn't go without saying goodbye, would you?
Of course not. That won't be till the morning anyway. Good night, Victoria.
Good night, Jamie.
We can't just leave her. We are not leaving her, Jamie. It was her decision to stay. She'll be quite all right with the Harrises. Now, don't worry so much, Jamie.
No, I'm just...
It'd be better if she could like,
come
move
on,
to
let's
London,
go.
you know?
Yeah.
Where would you
Unless
like
they had
to
a
go?
rig. Now we're going back up. You know, it makes sense in a story about weed that the TARDIS got high.
That is
And now,
infinitely one of the worst puns you've ever made.
now that I've completely ruined the moment, that is Fury from the Deep.
Interesting.
I'm still not sure if that's actually where they leave Victoria or not, but it's entirely possible. Unless they... I mean, this is the TARDIS we're talking about. Going back to a place is very difficult for it, so...
They've only actually done that once, haven't they, on the Ark? But that was like 700 years later.
Yeah, and then even with Ben and Polly, it took a long time before they got back, and it was just a coincidence they happened to get back there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that is well, it's an okay spot to leave Victoria, but that's a good place for her story to end.
Yeah.
You know, so. I mean, she hasn't done a ton, you know? It's one of those, like, okay, you know, here's our female companion. What does she do? She's there. Like, at the very least, like, well, when normally you would say, well, she's the one who screams. At least they use that to their advantage in this one.
Yeah.
But
I would have to say, other than Susan, this was probably the most extended farewell. You know, Ian and Barbara just got hey, there's the Dalek ship, head back to 1965 and get out quickly because it'll blow up.
Yeah.
And then it had the little montage. But this is the first time that they've actually had somebody say, you know what, I'm getting kind of fatigued at doing all of this, and maybe I'll stay behind. And then they actually had, like I said, an epilogue there, a good 5 to 10 minutes where she finally says, no, I think I'd rather stay here. So.
Yeah. Because, I mean, okay, so Susan, that was a big goodbye, and we got the Hartnell speech and everything. Ian and Barbara, I mean, they did kind of get their, like, montage of being back in 1965, which was good. And even that was more that it was either they took this opportunity with the Dalek time machine, or they probably wouldn't get another chance, so they just had to take it there. And then...
Was it Vicky first?
Yeah, Vicky.
And who falls in love with a kid from ancient Greece.
Yeah, in Troy. That may be the weirdest one we've had.
Because she falls in love so fast.
Yeah.
They really didn't develop that story.
Yeah.
It was just, we saw the two of them interact with each other, and we thought, okay, that's, but then suddenly she just says, no, I've decided to stay behind with Troilus. Yeah.
In Troy. Or what was left of it, I guess.
Yeah.
So, there was that. Then we got Stephen.
Stephen, who, again, that somewhat made sense in that they said, Doctor, we need somebody to stay here. And since Stephen and the Doctor had been arguing quite a bit about, what is justice and what's right and fair, then he says, well, listen, why don't you take this young man because he would be perfect for you. And Stephen says, well, Doctor, actually, that would be something that I would enjoy.
Yeah. Stephen's probably got the most character arc when it comes to his relationship with the Doctor and his eventual leave. And then Dodo had the worst exit of them all.
Because we didn't even see her. It's just, hey, she went off to see her aunt and never came back.
Yeah. Then after that was Ben and Polly.
Yeah.
So, which this is also the first time where normally we get, like, characters leave sort of in the order that they showed up. But this is the first time that it's like, no, we've had Jamie a lot longer than we've had Victoria, but Victoria is leaving before Jamie. Yeah. So,
and it makes you wonder, did they simply write her out because they wanted somebody new, or did she not want to continue?
Yeah.
So, I guess we can look that up.
Yeah, it is always something like that. So, it could be that they just needed someone new, or she was ready to move on. Yeah. So, all right. And going into the notes, that is the first thing I wrote down is, in the story, the reason is there's just no point where, you just stop and relax on these missions, you know? And that's true. Like, I feel like later on, once the Doctor actually gets control of the TARDIS, which even then is sort of 50-50 on if he goes to the right place, there are a lot more times where it's like, okay, the Doctor they go somewhere and they relax, and then the episode picks up and they're on an adventure. Or sometimes the Doctor will specifically take them somewhere like, oh, this is a nice, like, resort planet and stuff, and then something happens at that resort. Yeah. So, but this one, I mean, from what she's saying, it seems to be back-to-back just constant big threats, which, because it's even also, it's not just that it's, a lot of action, it's that it's a lot of really big stuff happening. Because she starts with the Daleks, then goes straight to the Cybermen, then the Yetis, and then what came after the Abominable Snowman? Was that was Enemy of the World with Salamander, and then the Yetis again, and now Seaweed. It's like that has been just completely packed of crazy adversaries. Whereas, you go back to some of them like, yeah, here's the Celestial Toymaker, and oh, this guy's kind of annoying, and let's go to the Gunfighters. Oh, well, the big problem here is that it's, it's the OK Corral and everything.
And the smugglers. I mean, so there weren't such existential threats.
Yeah, because even I feel like, I'm trying to remember everything from when it was Ben, Polly, and Jamie. But even then, it was sort of like, okay, you can sort of relax. Like, okay, here's the Highlanders. And then, some other stuff, even down to, like, the faceless ones. Like, we're at an airport, So, yeah, it's definitely, like, her time specifically has been just wall-to-wall sort of craziness.
I think one of the commenters said this was the monster season.
Yeah, it definitely is. So much that they reuse some of their monsters with the Yetis. So, So yeah, you do kind of understand where she's coming from, and I guess, you know, I mean, if you're not really cut out for that, that is very difficult. And Jamie is a bit more used to. Granted, he was maybe slowly introduced to that because he started off, you know, with the Highlanders and then got everything else, and now he's getting this stuff. But Victoria was sort of thrown in at the deep end.
Yeah.
And plus, with her origin specifically, it's not just that, oh, this is just a person that happened to join the TARDIS crew. It's that, no, she was being held hostage by the Daleks and, you know, Maxtable, the crazy alchemist or whatever, and then, you know, gets taken to Skaro, and then her friend dies, and then her dad dies, and then all this stuff, and then the Cybermen. So you really do understand where she's coming from.
She can be forgiven.
Yeah.
Now, there's one overarching thing from this entire serial that they never answered, and that is, where did the seaweed come from? You know, we know that it's a sentient plant, but was it something that was here on the planet and just the drilling reactivated it, or was it an alien presence? Not that we need to know.
Yeah.
But that's the one real big unanswered question is, where did this stuff come from in the first place?
I think the Doctor had some line that was like, well, it was probably, you know, it could have been, you know, unearthed by one of your rigs, but that was basically it, just sort of a, well, that's a possibility. But you're right, like, where did it come from? I mean, you know, when it's like, okay, here's the last episode, we've got all these seaweed dudes, let's figure out, all right, what is their purpose here? And then they screamed, they bailed, they got into the helicopters, they left, used the scream devices, and then they died. It's like, what? Okay, I thought we were going to get a bit more of, like, motivation and stuff. Like, we got a bit of, like, you know, they wanted, it kind of seemed like, okay, they want to assimilate the humans into...
Take over the planet,
Yeah, and do that sort of stuff, but that was just kind of it, and it was just sort of said offhand, and then they just sort of moved on. So.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's not a huge plot point. It doesn't take away from it.
Yeah.
But, you know, you wonder then, are we going to meet the seaweed on another planet if they were aliens, or, you know, will they come back in the future if somebody accidentally, you know, uncorks them again?
I guess, yeah. You know what? That sounds like it would be a Doctor Who comic book. That's like, oh, the seaweed comes back again, because they, you know, I guess they do that, you know, with Salamander. I think it's a pretty recent comic of Salamander facing the Third Doctor. So that kind of sounds like that would be a comic book or an audio book story of the seaweed returns, you know? So, although it would be interesting, you know, because obviously there are a lot of shots in this where it's like, oh man, I wish we could have seen what that actually looked like.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to get maybe a modern episode with the seaweed, you know, like, all right, let's get some modern special effects. What did this, you know, let's really see the seaweed and how, like, I don't know, you know what I'm trying to get at, though. So,
all right, but let's move on.
Let's see. Well, they kind of just took out the character of Van Latchens, which was unfortunate. I kind of liked him, but I guess after you get rid of Robson from the main plot, I guess Van Latchens doesn't really have too much of a purpose, you know? Which he even kind of said, you know, I can't really do much here because I don't really have the authority, but I can go down there myself and try to do this.
And they really set up Mrs. Harris, too, because, I mean, she wades out into the water and doesn't come back.
Yeah, it's...
So you kind of thought, well, maybe she is the one that is in control of everything, but then we don't see her until the very end again.
It seemed like they were setting her up as, okay, she's like now chosen as the leader of the humans that have been possessed, which, you know, originally they were trying to go after Mr. Harris, but got her instead. So you would think it would have been her at the end, but maybe there was just some sort of conflict. Maybe she didn't want to be in that seaweed makeup, so they're like, all right, Robson, you're up. So it could have been something like that, because, yeah, you're right. They sort of, you know, have that cliffhanger of her, you know, being like, okay, you need to do this while I go off and do whatever, and then she goes in the ocean, but then you don't see her again. She's not even with the others in that sort of, you know, group shot. She just shows up at the end. So I would be curious if that is sort of maybe the actress didn't want all that sort of makeup on. That reminds me, there's an 11th Doctor episode where they had to like severely rewrite the ending because the guy that was playing the villain was apparently like really angry on set all the time and eventually just like walked off having completed like 40% of his lines. So they just were like, okay, we have to rewrite this because we can't get this guy back anymore. So they just completely rewrote it. The Doctor does a sonic thing and then the day is saved. And so it's not a very good episode, but it's not entirely the episode's fault. It was just a bad actor on set for some reason. So let's see. The next thing I wrote down is Megan Jones, who, at first it does sort of seem like bringing in the Brigadier. Last episode, it's like, okay, she's now in charge. She's making some of the decisions, and she is listening to the Doctor and everything, even though it is so insane. Even before she sees all the seaweed and stuff and has the proof, she is starting to listen to them. And I thought, okay, well, that's kind of interesting, sort of that same sort of character as the Brigadier. And that's kind of it. I mean, the more important character was Harris, because he's been here the whole time, and so he knows what's going on. He trusts the Doctor, and so he's also making a lot of those decisions. Megan Jones just sort of shows up, I feel like, because we don't have Robson anymore. So, didn't get too much out of her.
And the first 10 minutes that she was on, I kind of got this impression. I thought, well, okay, I'm glad they're writing a good, strong female character who actually seems to be an anti-hero. I mean, she's coming and going, no, we can't do this. We're not going to call out all this stuff. I'm not going to say anything. And then, ultimately, like you said, she starts listening to the Doctor and she turns around, but then her part kind of fades into nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what you would have expected for Robson. It's like, okay, here's this person, they're trying to do it this specific way, by the book or however it is. But then slowly they do come around to the Doctor and they, start listening to all the options and stuff. But it's really only contained like in that first episode she's there. And then after that it's like, okay, well, we did the character arc that we could have done for the other character, so now what do we do with your character specifically? So, but it was also interesting getting a bit of why she specifically chose Robson for the job. It's like, okay, yeah, he is sort of he is sort of, a bit hard, but at the same time, he does have the practical experience. He can get the job done. He can make the decisions. And she was hoping that Harris could, learn something from Robson to make him better. It just ended up not working, especially once all the seaweed and conflict started to arise. So, let's see. Well, I wrote down blow up the rigs, but that just never happened. So
yeah. Now, again, this gets into that same thing that we had with the Ice Warriors. You come to a point where you have to say, in order to save the world, you might have to sacrifice some people. All right. And again, that's the choice that nobody wants to make. I was talking about one of my favorite books and then films, The Andromeda Strain, where the guy has to make the choice at the end: do I blow up the facility to kill the virus? And fortunately, he doesn't do that because the virus then would feed off of the nuclear radiation. But yeah, it's like they come down to it. It's like there's no way to save the rigs, and I realized that blowing them up would cut off gas and create a huge crisis in Great Britain and probably in the rest of Northern Europe. But at what point do you have to say we have to sacrifice the rigs and possibly the people inside them to kill the plant? And then the Doctor finally comes out and says, no, wait a minute, you can't do that because that will only allow the plant to grow even faster. We have to find a way to stop the plant. And his isn't so much as I want to save the gas, is I've got to prevent the seaweed from growing any further than it has.
Right. Which, I mean, that sounds like several Star Trek episodes, too. Like, there's something on the ship, and so, we have to blow it up or something. Yeah. So yeah, that is interesting, because, it's like, okay, well, if we blow up the rigs, this could cause, like, an energy crisis for, Europe and everything. But if we don't, the world could end, which I feel like is a much bigger crisis. So, you sort of weigh your options, And then we also had the helicopters, which was a very interesting scene. Again, it's one of those, like, this is the one we're missing, you know? This is the one we're missing, unfortunately. But still, it was a very interesting scene, even animated.
Yeah.
You know, and especially, I do like how, you know, they get into the other helicopter, and it's like, oh, but we don't have a pilot, and the doctor is just like, yes, I've been wanting to get my hands on one of these. So, I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, and I don't think this was stock footage from a James Bond film like it was over in Enemy of the World.
Right.
So, I would imagine they had some kind of mock-up, though, with Troughton in it, you know, because they had to have some close-ups of him.
Yeah. So, they probably just did have, you know, a place for close-ups with all of them in it, and then it had to have been some sort of, you know, interesting model work, basically, to have this helicopter, and again, all these, you know, seaweed tentacle things, you know, going around. So yeah, I do wish we could see that one. So, let's see. And we also did have, as far as we know, the reason for the seaweed doing all this was just that they wanted to take over humans and everything like that.
Take over the planet.
Yeah, so it was, like you said, it was going to be a little shop of horrors. So, wonder if it would have been the alternate ending. So, have you seen the alternate ending?
Yes, I have. Because that's the actual ending of the play, the stage musical. They have the entire theater rigged, and that last song is "Don't Feed the Plants." And when they get to that last, you know, the last line is, you know, whatever you do, don't feed the plants. And these gigantic tendrils like that drop down from the ceiling of the theater right over the audience's head, and everybody goes bat crap crazy because it's really frightening.
Yeah.
And of course, the movie, which was produced by Disney, even though it had some of the language in it, they said we cannot have the plant win. It's got to be Seymour going out there and, you know, it's me against the vegetable.
Oh yeah.
Which again, to me, totally ruins that, because the whole point of that of the original film and then of the remake, the stage musical, was that the humans don't win. You know, that the plants do take over the world.
Yeah. So that's how you do a PSA. Again, I referenced earlier a less than stellar Doctor Who episode I recently watched with the 13th Doctor, which was very much like a global warming PSA. Like, it almost had the 13th Doctor just looking at the camera and be like, you know, work on this global warming thing. So that's how you do a PSA. Just giant plant monsters attacking. Don't feed the plants.
Feed me, Krellborn. Feed me now.
Let's see. Well, you were right about the scream. You called it from the beginning, basically. However, you were not right about using the sonic screwdriver.
No, I just can't understand that. They took such pains to introduce the sonic screwdriver, and then later on when we find out, wait a minute, the plant reacts to sound.
Yeah.
What? I mean, seriously, wasted opportunity.
It's so strange, because obviously, you know, we're looking back on this, having now known what the sonic screwdriver becomes. But you're right, the way they introduce it, it's like, they had to have known, like, okay, here's an interesting little device, let's introduce it so we can use it later. Hey, you know, our whole thing depends on sound, let's use the sonic screwdriver we just introduced. And then they don't do that.
And then they don't do it.
I'm not even sure if the second Doctor uses the sonic screwdriver again in his era. Like, we might not see it again until the third Doctor. So, and there was also, at the beginning of episode 4, like, someone was talking to the Doctor, and he was just holding the sonic screwdriver right there, and it's like, well, okay, the animators want us to remember that, but there's no point to remembering it, because he's not going to use it.
Yeah.
So, no, instead we had the blasters.
No, I did think it was, again, it's very clever to have introduced early on that the plant reacts to sound, because, and it's only Victoria screaming, maybe because she was the higher pitched one, but it didn't seem to react to, you know, Jamie screaming or the Doctor screaming or Van Lutyens or whoever. So again, setting it up very nicely, carrying through to the end, but why did they take all of that time to show the sonic screwdriver, undoing the screws and all that, and then not use it somehow? I mean, even if he plugged it into the amplifier and said, hey, this will help amplify Victoria's screams, it's just, it's baffling why they would do that.
It's very strange. Like, unless unless on the original, like, you know, the whatever device he had, unless it's painfully obvious that you can see, it's like, oh, he used the sonic screwdriver there. But that's not in the animation, and obviously he doesn't say it. So, yeah, I'm not sure about that. That's such a strange... It's such a strange thing. Like, were they already thinking of, like... They couldn't have been thinking of a toy for the sonic screwdriver. And that's such a basic-looking sonic screwdriver, too.
In the late 60s... They were just barely coming out with action figures like G.I. Joe. I mean, so I don't think it was until Star Wars, really, until, like, that would have been, what, 77, 78?
Yeah.
Where they started coming out with specific action figures for films. And I would, again, imagine the first Doctor Who merchandise didn't come out till at least the 80s.
Yeah, so... Well, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I've never heard anything about, like, older Doctor Who merchandise, so... Yeah, I don't know. When did they first start making sonic screwdrivers? That'd be interesting. And obviously, you know, maybe not as advanced as, you know, the ones we have today. But I would be curious, just like, what did they look like at all if they were making them in the 80s? So, let's see. And then everything was resolved. Again, I did think, like, okay... So, we're dealing with the weeds that are here, and then we're going to go deal with the weeds at the rigs. And it's like, oh, wait, that happened simultaneously. They just didn't show... Like, you would think they would have showed the rigs and, like, the weeds going down, and then you cut back, but they didn't do any of that. But that's fine. Whatever. It's just a little thing. And then we had dinner. Again, just an epilogue. We never get that. Even, like, you know, last episode in The Web of Fear, it's like, oh, well, everything worked out. Well, bye. And then they just bail. The Doctor always bails so quickly. But
now, and again, this is not a criticism or anything, but at the very end there, Victoria is what, 18, 19 years old?
Something like that.
The Harrises didn't look like they were old enough to be able to take care of an older teenage girl. I mean, sure, she's probably going to go out and get a job and all that, but you know, you get the impression that they're going to become her new family, and that's just... You know, that would be like me turning you over to somebody who's only in their early 40s, because they're not old enough to know how to deal with a young person like that.
Yeah.
So minor point.
I mean, and it is just one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, the Harrises, they're good people, but you have to stay at a rig, you know? You have to, the control rig, basically, and it's like, well, that's not a great place to live, but obviously, I wouldn't think that she would go live in London by herself, because that might be a little too much for our Victorian girl.
Well, like you said, she could go look up Ben and Polly and Barbara and Ian and all those others. But again, the Doctor would have had to say, listen, you know, some of my previous companions are in this time period, so if you ever need any help, you know, contact these people at Cold Hill School, or go see Dodo, can't remember her last name now, something with a C.
Chaplet,
Dodo, yeah. So Ben and Polly.
Yeah, or even having Jamie say that would also make sense. Like, it's like, oh yeah, you know, some of our old friends that used to travel before you, Ben and Polly, you could go live with them. So,
you know, and just say, you know, the Doctor dropped me off here, and that's all you'd ever need to have to say.
Yeah, basically. So, but still, I mean, it's not terrible living with the Harrises at a rig, you know? So, but yeah, I'm not... I feel like I thought that Victoria went a lot longer, but it's entirely possible that I'm just wrong. Yeah. So, I've been wrong about stuff like that before. So, yeah, it's entirely possible that this is where we are saying goodbye to Victoria, and we'll pick up some other unsuspecting soul next time.
Speaking of which, what is up next?
I think next is called The Wheel in Space.
Okay.
And I believe it's heavy recon territory again, which I think there's only 2 serials that are heavy recons now. Everything else, like, I think it's like The Wheel in Space, and then I don't remember what the other one was, but 2 episodes that are heavy recon episodes, and then I think 1 more animated, just full animated episode. And then after that, I think we're pretty much done with recons and missing episodes. So it's sometime in season 6, I know that we'll be done with the recons and missing episodes. And come to think of it, I have no idea how much is left in this season. So
Yeah.
I don't have my schedule pulled up. So oh well. But we'll have to see. I'm pretty sure the next one's called The Wheel in Space,
Okay.
which is one of the most vague titles we've ever had. So we'll have to see what
Sounds
that means.
like a space station of some kind. Because they were almost always, back in the 60s and 70s, thought to be able to function properly in space, they would have to be like Deep Space Nine, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, who knows? Maybe this will be the strange crossover with Deep Space Nine, a show that didn't exist yet. So
yeah, the Star Trek, the original series, was just going off the air in 69.
Yeah.
It was there 66, 67, and then 67, 68, and then it ended in the summer of 69, so...
According to this, we are still in 68.
That'd be, about season 2, early season 3 of Star Trek, the original series.
Yeah. Says the 6th episode here aired April 19th, 1968. So yeah, it would have been interesting if they did some sort of crossover. Of course, the comics have you covered for crossovers with Star Trek. Yeah. I know there's one where it's the 11th Doctor and Picard in Next Gen, and then they do a flashback to the 4th Doctor with Captain Kirk. So, and then there's the Borg and the Cybermen, and they're teaming up and all that sort of stuff. So, anywho.
Oh, and before we go, and I didn't check with you, but you guys probably know we do these things, and they're aired. They actually go up like a week or so later. But this morning was the funeral for Prince Philip, and just wanted to say I personally, having lived in England, and again, this was back in the 60s, and I understand there's a whole lot of different feelings about the royal family, but my personal feeling was that Philip was a good man to his wife and to his children, so I just wanted to say, Godspeed, Prince Philip.
Yeah. I have nothing really to comment either way, but yeah. So, anywho, that gives you a little insight as to when we are recording this. In fact, that gives you an exact date, basically. But that's fine. Yeah, so we normally record these like about 2 weeks or so
before they go up,
in advance. So, anywho, with all of that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of our Doctor Who classic reactions, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.